Carl Fisher was born in the town of Greensburg, which is a county seat town southeast of Indianapolis, some ways, about 60 miles, I think. In 1874, his mother and father separated. I'm not sure there was an official divorce, and he became the sole support of the family for a while. He got to 6th grade and finished it, and then at the age of 12, he started to work for the railroad selling newspapers and candy on the trains. He worked for the New York Central for several years, and in any case, at the age of 17, he and his younger brothers, so they were all kids, founded a bicycle shop. It was mainly a bicycle repair shop. Then he went on to repair and sell them, and then he went on to actually manufacture them, making improvements on them all the time. He was something of an inventor, although to my knowledge he never got any patents, but he always worked to improve things, and he always seemed to draw around him people who were, as he put it, smarter than he was in certain areas, and he got them to work with him. He just seemed to get along with everybody. His biggest asset, it was always said, was his smile. I should add, though, that he had some handicaps. Not only was he, from a broken home and forced to work very young, but he was 50% blind. Fisher was interested in anything new and anything fast, you might say, and also loved to tinker with things. Like many bicycle entrepreneurs, he early on went into automobile selling and manufacturing and dealing as well. He very soon after began to sell automobiles in his bicycle shop. He sold the Premier, which was made in Indianapolis, and the Winston. And then later he became a certified dealer for the Stoddard Dayton car. And that's the one that he is known for, where he actually attached that to a balloon and flew it over the city. He really knew how to promote. So he did a lot of stunts with that. He began to acquaint himself with a lot of other early bicycle/automobile entrepreneurs. One of them was Arthur Newby. Fisher also was acquainted with a man named James Allison. He went in with Allison and another guy to fund the research that developed the Presto light, which was an early automobile light, making it practical to drive at night, because prior to this, the only night lighting on an automobile were kerosene lanterns, if you can imagine. That would be, you couldn't go very fast at all. There are various stories how he became acquainted with what acetylene gas would do, but it gives off a very bright light. And so this made it practical to drive at night. So he and Allison set up the Presto Light factory. Now, acetylene is something that could explode, so they decided to build it quite a ways out of town, about 5 miles out of town. Gee, guess what? Right where the Speedway was going to be, because Fisher began to see that, well, there's all these things we need to develop, all these new ideas. We have to see if they work first. We have to test all these things out, so let's build a big track. So where else but across from the Presto Light plant, perfect place. He was already good buddies with a real estate promoter, so he had a way of getting the land pretty reasonably. So they bought largely one person's farm, the Presley farm, and a few others, and they built the track, which was completed in 1909. The Presto Light factory, I believe, was about 5 years earlier. And they also platted the town of Speedway a little later on. So he was responsible for the entire complex that later became Speedway. He loved speed, so naturally he would think about racing, although, again, the track was originally built for testing purposes. But he did hold an automobile race at the Speedway in 1909, but the first auto race that was held there was not a good one, not a success, because a lot of people got hurt because he had a gravel and tar track, something like McAdam, and it didn't hold up to those high speeds. So that's when they got the idea to pave it with bricks. And initially, the entire Indy 500 track was paved with brick, and that's why it's called the Brickyard to this day. And they kept that little patch of bricks right at the start of it. So the first Indianapolis 500 was in 1911. So Fisher was always looking for ways to promote the automobile and its use and get it out to the people. He was really a democratic sort of person. He wanted everybody to be able to be free to drive around. He promoted the less expensive cars very often. He had been an early proponent of good roads in general. He was a founding member of the Hoosier Motor Club, which was in the very early years of the 20th century. and was still an official of the Hoosier Motor Club when he got the idea to promote the concept of a coast-to-coast highway. So that originally was called the Coast-to-Coast Rock Highway. Does not come trippingly off your tongue. So he and his partners got the idea to change the name to the Lincoln Highway. And the idea of the Lincoln Highway was that Lincoln united the country, or that was his idea, and this highway would unite the country by going from the East Coast to the West Coast. And so the concept of the Lincoln Highway was born. And of course, in reality, at least initially, the Lincoln Highway was not even entirely paved, but it was marked, and they marked it with markers. There was a Lincoln Highway sort of a logo, and it was put on concrete posts and painted on phone poles and such. And also they sold guidebooks, and they went by various landmarks. He then thought, well, let's go north and south. By then he had Fisher never sat still. By then he had discovered the little town of Miami, a little tiny town in Florida, but across the bay from it was this island full of mangrove swamps. But they were thinking, oh, we'll drain this swamp and we'll make it into this paradise. So he created, essentially, the city of Miami Beach. It was meant for people of wealth, obviously, but how were they going to get there? Well, let's have a north-south highway, too. So that's what he did. The difference with the Dixie Highway from the Lincoln Highway is that the Dixie Highway did end up as one road down to, and ended up, guess where, Miami Beach. But in the north, it started from several different places. So we actually have a couple different Dixie Highways in Indiana. One goes through Terre Haute, and one goes through South Bend. And there's a place in South Bend, they have it marked, a historical marker, that the Dixie Highway and Lincoln Highway cross. Well, things were starting to be built there when a hurricane in 1926 wiped out Miami Beach. Miami Beach eventually recovered, and it is what it is today. And the people in Miami Beach, everything's Fisher. They have a big statue erected to him. They consider him the founder of the city, which he was. But that pretty much broke him. He divorced his first wife in the late 20s, married another. He always was a heavy drinker. His finances were really rugged by this time. So the last decade of his life was not too happy. He began to experience health problems, probably from the drinking, and died of some gastric ailment. One source even says cirrhosis of the liver, although that's only one source. The rest of the sources say this gastric ailment. He died in Miami Beach, was buried there initially, but exhumed, and now is in Crown Hill.